The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Madam Speaker, yesterday, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance chose Toronto to make an announcement to give Canadians hope about inflation. But unfortunately, once again, the Minister of Finance showed that she's completely disconnected from Canadians' reality. She didn't make any new announcement, just re-announcements. So I have a question. Why does this Liberal government refuse to help Canadian families by lowering taxes? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Tourism. Well, there's a simple answer. We have lowered taxes on the middle class, whereas the Conservatives voted against that. It's unacceptable that today the Conservatives are asking us to do what they refused to do a few years ago. Yesterday, the Deputy Prime Minister announced our plan to support Canadians during this period of inflation and cost of living increase. It's a serious plan, whereas the Conservatives have nothing to propose. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, Madam Speaker, everyone knows that this year this government increased the carbon tax. Today, we heard in the Journal de Montréal a scathing but true comment, which is that all of this Liberal government's measures will not fight inflation. In fact, they'll make it worse. In what unicorn country does this Deputy Prime Minister live? That's the problem. She's out of touch. She lives in fantasy land. But Canadians have to live in the Liberal Canada where taxes are increasing. Why does this government not want to reduce taxes for all Canadians? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleague spoke about carbon pricing, and I'd like to remind him that federal carbon pricing does not apply to Quebec, since Quebec has its own cap-and-trade system, first of all. And secondly, in the provinces where the carbon pricing system applies, people get more back from that system than what is taken away from them. In Ontario, families will get $745 this year, $830 in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan, $1,100, and in Alberta, $1,080. So Canadians are better off with this carbon pricing system. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, it's always nice to hear the former founder of Équiterre, who is currently being brought to court by Équiterre, tell us about the situation. Now, the reality is that countries like Germany, Great Britain, Australia, South Korea, the US have all taken measures to reduce taxes, especially on gas. Why? Because fuel prices affect everyone, especially when you're trying to buy groceries, because those groceries were transported and used fuel. And so those taxes are being passed on in food prices. Why is this government refusing to lower taxes? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Tourism. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And honestly, I find it shameful that a colleague from Quebec is saying we need to lower taxes on oil companies, when we know that we are facing a climate crisis in Canada and throughout the world. We will end up paying a lot more if we don't address the climate crisis today. And Madam Speaker, that's what we're doing on this side of the House.
Member for Windsor West.
Madam Speaker, hardworking Canadians are getting crushed by the rising cost of living. People across this country can barely afford the gas to drive to work or to get groceries. Yesterday, this government had a chance to finally give them a helping hand. Instead, the Deputy Prime Minister was on Bay Street reassuring the richest 1% that the Liberals won't tax the record oil and gas profits or give Canadians the help they need right now. What will it take for this government to stop making re-announcements and finally stand up for working-class Canadians getting gouged at the pumps?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire pour le ministre associé des Finances.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And yesterday, the Minister of Finance did give a speech on Bay Street in order to explain to Canadians how we are having their backs in this time of unprecedented volatility on a global scale, Madam Speaker. In fact, she detailed a 5-point plan that is going to help Canadians deal with the inflationary crisis that we're seeing right around the world. We have an affordability plan that is putting money directly back into the pockets of Canadians. What the NDP is proposing is tax hikes on grocery stores, which could only lead to increased prices for groceries for Canadians.
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. In her speech at the Empire Club this week, the Deputy Prime Minister treated inflation like it was a public relations problem for the government. rather than the very real financial issue that it is for so many Canadians. As she was speaking, new mothers on employment insurance and others depending on EI were having their EI payments garnished to pay debt back to the government while they're trying to keep their home. It's the wrong approach. We didn't hear anything new in the speech yesterday. I'm hoping soon we're going to hear that the government will bring into force a low-income CERB repayment amnesty and a freeze on payments for middle-class Canadians who are struggling to keep their homes in this time of inflation. When are we going to hear that?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire pour le ministre associé des Finances.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, and I'd like to thank the finance critic for the NDP for his question and for his work on the Finance Committee. I would point out, that, of course, that yesterday's plan that was announced by our Minister of Finance included many supports that Canadians will feel for the first time this year. Madam Speaker, for a couple in Ontario with an income of $45,000 and a child in daycare, our plan could mean an additional $7,350 this year above existing benefits. This is real money going back into the pockets of real Canadians.
Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Canadians are struggling and looking for relief, but instead they're getting skyrocketing costs, unaffordable groceries, and Toonie a litre gas. Because of the Liberals' reckless spending and double dipping with taxes on top of taxes, Canadians are barely making it to the end of the month. And just like George Costanza, these Liberals will keep dipping as they see fit. It's disgusting. When will the Liberals stop double dipping in Canadians' pockets and give us some relief?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are making jokes about a very serious situation. Maybe the honourable member saw what happened this week with cryptocurrency. That's a type of economic policy that's coming from the Conservative Party these days, Madam Speaker. Do the Conservatives not agree that a 50% reduction in childcare this year is real savings for Canadian families? Do they not believe that $2,400 in the pockets of a family of 3 through the Canada Workers Benefit is real money in the pockets of Canadian workers? They should know that. They voted against all of these measures.
That's right.
Yeah, there's a lot of chatting going back and forth here, and I would just ask those members that they're not being recognized for questions or for replying, so I would ask them to hold on to their thoughts. The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
The parliamentary secretary talks about jokes. What's a joke was yesterday the minister stood in this house when I talked about rising costs and talked about history with things that happened 10 years ago when it was her government, when it was that minister's department who approved $93,000 in champagne and caviar for government officials while Canadians can't afford to heat their homes or to feed their families. It's a failed approach that they've doubled down on time and time again. So really, if anyone's laughing, we can't hear them because the joke is on that side of the house. It might come as a surprise to them, but just like budgets, gas prices, grocery bills, they won't balance themselves. Will the Liberals cut taxes for Canadians?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Madam Speaker, we did cut taxes for Canadians, and the Conservatives voted against it. Thank goodness that there was other support in this House to ensure that Canadians would see a reduction in their taxes, Madam Speaker. And when it comes to supporting Canadians, we will continue to put in place the measures that put money directly back into the pockets of Canadians. I'm thinking of a one-time payment for all Canadians having trouble finding low-income housing. That's coming into effect this year, Madam Speaker. We also have a reduction in childcare costs of up to 50% this year. Real money back into the pockets of real Canadians.
The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
ABS. That's right, Madam Speaker. ABS. When buying a vehicle, ABS stands for Automatic Braking System. When your vehicle senses an impending danger, it brakes immediately. But Canadians have no such braking system when it comes to our finances. In fact, we have the opposite. This finance minister has a different take on ABS. Always be spending, always be spending. Will she order an immediate pause to all discretionary spending to fight inflation, or does their blood pact with the NDP forbid any of that?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Madam Speaker, the Conservatives are changing their tone by day. Yesterday, the member was accusing us of not spending more money in order to support Canadians, and today he's saying that we're spending too much. Well, which is it, Madam Speaker, what we have done is ensure that over the course of the last several months and years, our budgetary planning would ensure that we would be there for Canadians.
Order. I'm sure that the honourable members, the opposition party, would want to hear, and there's going back and forth on both sides. I'm sure that everyone would like to hear what the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary is saying, because I'm sure that they may have a follow-up question. So the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary can restart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I was saying, they're changing their story by day. Yesterday, the honourable member was accusing our government of not adding new spending into the economy in order to support Canadians, and today he's saying we're spending too much. In fact, Moody's, S&P, all of the credit agencies have reconfirmed our AAA credit rating. The spending that the minister put forward yesterday was included in our fiscal framework. We are there for Canadians while ensuring we don't add fuel to the fire and continue the inflationary spiral. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
That member's just plain wrong, and I see where she gets it from. The Minister of Finance has gotten inflation wrong at every turn. Right. She said deflation was the concern. Wrong. Then it was transitory. Wrong. Now she has a so-called affordability plan, which only includes, you guessed it, Madam Speaker, more spending. Stephen Gordon is an economist at Laval and has said now is not the time for increased spending, as it only pours fuel on the inflationary fire. Instead, she could reduce discretionary spending, stop the Morneau escalator on user fees, give Canadians a break at the pumps. Will she listen to Conservatives and start fighting inflation? Or does she, just like her Prime Minister, just love spending too much?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, all of the experts agree what we have presented is a very fiscally responsible budget. In April, S&P and Moody's have reconfirmed our AAA credit rating. Our debt to GDP ratio continues to consistently go down, Madam Speaker, and our economic forecast is absolutely incredible. Experts are predicting that this year and next year, Canada will have the highest and fastest growth among G7 countries. Madam Speaker, we will continue to create jobs and ensure strong economic growth.
I remember Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Madam Speaker, when asked why the government won't temporarily remove GST from gasoline to help offset the high cost of fuel, the government claimed that there was no evidence that removing a tax at the point of sale would reduce prices. They even called the suggestion a subsidy for industry. Madam Speaker, is this government so economically illiterate that it actually thinks that removing a tax on consumers is an industry subsidy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, that the way that the GST is administered in this country is that we impose it on the company, in this case the oil company, and that they pass it on to consumers. What I have been explaining is that there is no certainty that oil companies will pass that savings directly.
I apologize.
I would just ask members to keep whatever they have to think about in their head until it's time for them to ask a question. And I don't think that comment was very respectful at all. So I appreciate the honourable member saying that he's sorry, but again, I would just remind members to maybe just hold off to their thoughts and comments until it's their turn to ask a question. The honourable member for the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I would just say that so far all of the Conservatives have been proposing when it comes to economic policy is either a tax cut for oil companies or an elimination of certain tariffs that we've imposed on Russia, Madam Speaker. This is not serious economic policy. What we have proposed is.
Again, you know, I think others are trying to weigh in on the response, and I would just ask them to wait. The honourable member for Charleswood, St. James, and Sydney-Boy-Headingley.
Gas prices, food prices, home prices. You know what they all have in common, Madam Speaker? They're all going up, way up. You know what else is going way up, Madam Speaker? Government revenues from the massive taxes they collect on those things. While the Liberal cabinet is flush with cash, kitchen cabinets are looking pretty bare. Will the Prime Minister finally wake up, have just a little compassion for those who are struggling, and give Canadians a tax break so that they can at least afford to put food on the table.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I agree with the member opposite. Canadians are feeling it. They're feeling increased prices at the grocery store and at the pump, which is why, as prices are increasing, so are our benefits. Many, if not all of our important benefits supporting Canadians right now are indexed to inflation, which means that they will continue to increase as inflation increases. Also increasing this year, Madam Speaker, is our support for seniors with the old age security benefit. Also increasing, Madam Speaker, is the Canadian workers benefit, and I could go on and on. Thank you.
Honorable député.
Joliette. Madam Speaker, yesterday we were looking forward to hearing the Minister of Finance detail her plan to help people and businesses to face inflation, but we were disappointed. There's no increase to GST for the most vulnerable, no monthly payments, nothing for industries affected by the price of fuel like trucking, agriculture, or taxis, no increase in OAS for people under 75, nothing about the labor shortage. The minister just repeated measures that were already announced in the budget. Why did she show up empty-handed when people are struggling? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the question posed by my colleague. What was announced yesterday is very important. It's a plan that will support Canadians who are facing an increase in the cost of living. Whether with an increase in the Canada Workers' Benefit or an increase in old age security, as well as one-time payments for Canadians who are having trouble finding affordable housing. This is a real plan which is not pouring more oil on the fire and which is managing our economy properly here in Canada. The honourable member, no, it was re-announcements, Madam Speaker. No one in this government is listening to Quebecers. Ever since the Minister of Finance seems to have become Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs all at the same time, there's no one left to move forward files that affect businesses and people. The fact that the minister is wearing 3 hats and doesn't want to delegate to her colleagues means that this government just doesn't understand what's happening on the ground. Does anyone in this government realize that inflation is a real problem with real consequences and that we need a response now, not in 6 months? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, the Bloc Québécois is accusing us of making re-announcements. Is it proposing that we pour more oil on the fire and spend billions of dollars now at a time when inflation is the problem? We have already spent $300 billion during the pandemic in order to help Canadians. This is not the time to spend more. What we did yesterday was explain everything that we've put in place, for example, in the April budget, to help Canadians.
Rents will continue to rise and things will only get worse for people already struggling to pay for groceries. Rent for a 1-bedroom unit in Vancouver is over $2,300 a month. In Toronto, over $2,100. In Halifax, almost $1,700. The Liberals' response to struggling Canadians is an extra $7 on the GST check. The government is so out of touch with reality. Will the Liberals double the GST rebate and increase the Canada Child Benefit by $500 so families can get an additional $500 to $1,000 back into their pockets?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for the question, and we agree that the costs of rent are increasingly difficult, and that is why in the budget, there is the Canadian Housing Benefit. It's more than $4 billion. So this year, we will add money into it in order to help families to pay these very increasingly difficult rents to pay.
Madam Speaker, we've already seen the steepest 52-week rise in the price of meat since Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and we've producers across the prairies reeling because of dry conditions. With this government's insistence on pushing through front-of-package labeling on beef and pork, they are further hamstringing producers and consumers without solid evidence, and this expensive change is necessary. With Canada set to become the only country on earth to impose this policy, is the government using the same top secret scientists they used to defend their unnecessary COVID mandates to now defend kneecapping our egg producers?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health and the Minister of Sports.
Thank you very much.
much, Madam Speaker. On this side of the House, we are alarmed and concerned about the rising rates of illnesses, particularly chronic illnesses that are impacted by poor diets. And these labels are widely recognized by health organizations in the scientific community as an effective tool to help counteract rising rates of diet-related chronic disease that continue to rise in Canada. Madam Speaker, more information for consumers is always a good thing. And during our engagements with industry stakeholders, Health Canada experts, and Canadians across the country, Health Canada analyzed the feedback and received and has made adjustments to the proposal where supported by science. Madam Speaker, on this side of the House, we will always be there for Canadians when they're making good decisions at the grocery store.
The honourable member for Desnethé, Miss NDP Churchill River.
Madam Speaker, residents in northern Saskatchewan travel great distances to attend medical appointments in Saskatoon. From Meadow Lake, it is 3 hours. From Pierceland or Goodsoil, it's over 4 hours. From La Loche or Creighton, over 6 hours. Depending on road conditions, from Stony Rapids, it can be 14 hours. And Madam Speaker, these are one way. Can the minister tell us if the rising price of gas is threatening her constituents' ability to receive the medical care that they need, like it is my constituents?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health and the Minister of Sport.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable colleague for his commitment to his constituents and his consistent advocacy, particularly for lower-income families in his riding. Madam Speaker, the Health Committee just concluded a study on the health care human resources crisis in this country. We're going to make sure that every Canadian has access to a family doctor, whether that's through telehealth in remote ridings like in my friend's riding. But Madam Speaker, the rising cost of living is reverberating across this country, and we'll be there for Canadians to support their health.
The honourable member for South Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After stridently defending it, this government has suspended the vaccine requirement to travel domestically or outbound internationally. Provinces have acted, lifting COVID-related mandates, citing high vaccination rates, reduced hospitalizations, and lower COVID case counts. Even Liberal caucus members want all federal pandemic restrictions lifted. The Prime Minister's office is acting alone, using these mandates as a political weapon of choice. When will this Prime Minister put an end to divisive mandates that don't follow the science?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On this side of the House, we agree that Canadians want to get back to normal, and we all want to get back to normal, but we have to be honest. The COVID pandemic is not over yet. And at every step, we've adapted our COVID-19 measures based on the current situation. And this week, we were able to announce that we are lifting the travel mandates, pausing them, because this pandemic is not over, Madam Speaker, and because of our strong vaccination rates, we are able to relax some of those requirements. But Canadians continue to die from COVID-19, and we can't take our foot off of the brake just yet. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
During the last election, the Liberal platform promised to develop a safe, long-term care act to ensure that our seniors are guaranteed the care that they deserve, no matter where they live. Over 9 months later, nothing has happened. Madam Speaker, seniors are tired of waiting. It's been long enough. When will this government show some respect and stop treating seniors as second-class citizens and commit to tabling a long-term care act?
Good. The Honourable Minister of Seniors.
Madam Speaker, this pandemic continues to highlight the challenges in long-term care, including gaps in infection prevention and staffing. I personally, Madam Speaker, have seen these challenges on the front lines as a nurse. Madam Speaker, our government has made significant investments, including $4 billion through provinces and territories to improve the standard of care in those facilities. And Madam Speaker, I'd like to remind the member opposite that actually her party voted against the measure when we put it in the fall economic statement. $41.9 billion in cash support for provinces and territories through the Canada and Health Transfer, Madam Speaker. We will keep working with provinces and territories so that we can continue to fight this pandemic and ensure seniors in long-term care have the supports that they need.
Many of my residents in my riding are struggling to make ends meet. Helping special needs children and giving the required assistance has had an emotional and financial impact. Care centres are having to severely cut hours. This government has failed our most vulnerable citizens who are urgently attempting to stay afloat. When will this government stop punishing Canadians and start demonstrating compassion and doing its job by assisting our most vulnerable family in meeting their basic needs?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Since 2015, we have taken historic steps towards building a barrier-free Canada. In addition to the $112 million from Budget 2021, with Budget 2022, we are investing nearly $300 million in disability inclusion, including an employment strategy for persons with disabilities and funding to support the creation of materials for persons with print disabilities. Moving forward, we are committed to implementing the Disability Inclusion Action Plan, which will establish a robust employment strategy, enhance eligibility for government disability programs and benefits, introducing the Canada Disability Benefit Act to address poverty among Canadians with disabilities. We all benefit when everyone participates equally in society. Thank you, Madam Speaker.